Hi friend, welcome to the live study channels. Today I'm going to discuss Hibernate Interview Question and Answer for Professional. Okay, so let's start. Just to see the Java applications means it's just a flow of chart in a Hibernate how to connect with the application to Hibernate means the JPA repository also means a persistence object. Okay, in a database in a second level cache, first level cache. Okay, configuration section, session, configuration, query and transactions, right? So my first question is, what are the advantages of using Hibernate over JDBC? Okay, in Hibernate eliminate a lot of the boilerplate code that comes with JDBC APIs. The code look clear and readable. This Java framework supports inheritance, association, and collections. These features are actually not present in a JDBC. Means HQL means a Habinet query language is a more object-oriented, close to Java, but the JDBC you need to write native SQL query. Hibernate implicitly provide transaction measurement, whereas in a JDBC APIs you need to write code for transaction measurement using commit rollback. JDBC through SQL exception, that is checked exceptions, so you have to write a lot of try catches block code. Hibernate wrap JDBC exception and throw JDBC exception or Hibernate exception, which are the unchecked exceptions, so you don't have to write code to handle it. Has built in a transaction measurement, which help in removing the usage of try catch block. Move to the another question. Another question is, why use Hibernate framework? Very most important question for our interview also room plus your knowledge point of view. In Hibernate overcome the shortcoming of other technique that like JDBC. It's overcome the database dependency phase in a JDBC. Changing of the database cost a lot of working on JDBC. But in a Hibernate overcome this problem with the flying colors, means code portability is not an option while working on JDBC. This is easily handled by the Hibernate. Hibernate strength the object level relationship. It is overcome the exception handling part, which is mandatory while working on JDBC. It reduces the length of code with increased reusability by overcome the boilerplate problem. Another question is, what is an ORM tools? It is basically a technique that maps the object that is stored in the database. And ORM tools help in a simplified data creation, manipulation, and access. Mean get, put, update. It is internally use the Java APIs to interact with the database. Right? Means interact with the database. Right? First step is like Java application. Okay. Then object, then ORM, then database. Right? Means the first step is create a project, right? To create a object means classes. Okay, then ORM means object readable measurement, and to connect to the database. Means this process is between Hibernate, right? Move to the another question. Another question is, what are the different functionalities supported by Hibernate? Hibernate is an ORM tools. Hibernate use Hibernate query language which make it database independent. It support auto DDL means data definition language operation. This Java framework also has a auto primary key generation support caches memory, and exception handling is not mandatory in a case of Hibernate. Means it's not support in a cache. Means in a Hibernate there are two types of cache memory. First cache and second level caches. Okay. Another question is, what is HQL? SQL means Hibernate Query Language is the acronyms of Hibernate Query Language. It is object-oriented query language and it is independent of database. How to achieve mapping in a Hibernate? Association mapping are one of the key features of Hibernate. It supports the same association as the relational database models. They are means first one-to-one association, one-to-many association, many-to-one association, many-to-many association, right? Means one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one. More detail I will discuss in a next video, so don't be confused. It's a very most important question. There are most important questions. Means generally asked in a Hibernate question in an interview room. Means many to many, many to one, and one to many. Okay, so don't be. I will discuss in a next video. Okay, move to the another question. Another question is, some of the important interface in a Hibernate framework. Is a Hibernate interface are first session factory and transaction, right? Means you can use in a org.hibernate.session factory and org.hibernate.session hibernate.transactions, right? Suppose transaction factory is immutable thread safe caches of compiled mapping for a single database. We need to initialize session factory once and then we can cache and reuse it. Session factory instance is used to get the session object for database operations, right? That's why it's a session factory, and the session is a single thread and short-lived object representative as a conversation between the application and the persistence store. It is wrap JDBC means java.sql.connection and work as a factory means for Hibernate, right? The transaction we should open session only when it is required and close it as soon as we are done using it. Session object is the interface between Java application code and Hibernate framework and provide method for CRUD operation means create, run, update, delete. Transaction is a single thread short-lived object used by the application to specify atomic unit of work. It is abstract the application from the underlying JDBC or JTA transaction. Is a org.hibernate.session might spam multiple org.hibernate.transaction in some cases, right? Another question is how to integrate Hibernate and Spring. Spring is also one of the most commonly used Java framework in the market today. Spring is a G2E framework and Hibernate is the most popular ORM framework. This is and why Spring Hibernate combination is used in a lot of enterprise application. The following are the steps you should follow to integrate Spring and Hibernate. Means add Hibernate entity manager, Hibernate core and Spring ORM dependencies. Create model classes and corresponding DAO means data access object. Implementation for database operations. The DAO classes will use session factory that will be injected by the Spring Bean configuration. Note that you don't need to use Habinet transaction measurement as you can leave it the Spring declarative transaction measurement using the other transactional annotation. Another question is what do you mean by Hibernate configuration file? Hibernate configuration file mainly contain data specific configuration and are used to initialize session factory. But some important part of the Hibernate configuration file are dialect information so that Hibernate know as the database type and mapping file are classes determines string.jpa.properties.hibernate.dilate is equal to object.hibernate.dilate.mysql5 dilate. Right, you can write it. Another question is maintain some important annotation used for Hibernate mapping. Hibernate support JPA annotation. Some of the major annotation are means Java x.persistence entities, Java x.persistence table, persistent access, persistence ID, persistence embedded ID, and persistence column. Persistence generated value means entity. Entity means this is used to model classes to specify they are entity beans. Table, it is used with entity bean to define the corresponding table name in a database. Access, used to define the access type field or property. The default value is a field, and if you want to Hibernate to use the getter and setter method, then you need to set it as the properties. ID means they define the primary key in the entity bin. Embedded ID, it is define a composite primary key in the entity bin. Column means help in a define the column name is database table. Generate value means it is define the strategy to be used for the generation of the primary key. It is also used in the conjunction with the Java X for dot persistence generation key in numbers. Means there are some tables when the entity tables access ID embedded ID column generated through the direct. Hibernate is a direct create your table in a database. Okay, if you write the table, if you write a query in a entity field, then directly Hibernate is created table in a database, right? Move to the another question. Another question is what is the session in a Hibernate and how to get it? Hibernate session is the interface between Java application layer and Hibernate. It is used to get a physical connection with the database. The session object created is a lightweight and designed to be initiated each time an interaction is needed with the database. This session provides method to create, read, update, and delete operation for a constant object. To get initiation, you can execute SQL query and SQL native query using the session object. Means if you want to create in a database means through the SQL, through the Oracle, through the SQL, so directly session is a very useful to create, update, post, delete, Okay, means suppose I'm run the query. I'm running a just I'm just run the create query. Okay, but my query is not a response shortly. So definitely is between it is a session maintain between those, right? This is called session. What another question is, what is a Hibernate mapping file? The Hibernate mapping file is used to define the entity being filled and database table column mapping. We know that the JPA annotation can be used for mapping, but sometimes XML mapping file come handy when you are using third-party classes and we can't be used to use annotation. What is Hibernate session factory? In session factory is the factory that class that is used to get the session object. The session factory is a heavyweight object, so usually it is created during the application startup and keep the later use. This session factory is thread safe object which is used by all the threads of an application. If you are using multiple database, then you should have to create the multiple session object. Another question is, what is difference between open session and get current session? This get current session method return the session bound to be next and constants and for this to work you need to configure it is Hibernate configuration file. Since this session object belong to the construct of Hibernate, it is okay if you don't close it. Once the session factory is closed, the session object get closed. Open session method help in opening a new session. You should close the session object once you are done with all the database operations, and also you should open a new session for each request in a multiple threaded environment. What is another question is, what do you mean by Hibernate configuration file? The following step help in configuration Hibernate file. The first step is first identify the Pojo class means plain object Java object, that is plain old Java object that have a database representation. Identify which property of Pojo to be continue annotation each of the Pojo class in order to map the Java object to column in a database table. Create a database Sigma using the Sigma export tool which use an existing database, or you can create your own database schema. Point number 5. Add the Hibernate Java library to be application class path. Create a Hibernate XML configuration file that point to be the database and the mapped classes. In the Java application, you can create a Hibernate configuration object that refer to your XML configuration file. Also build a Hibernate session factory but object from the configuration object. Retrieve the Hibernate session object from the session factory and write down the data access logic for your application. Means create, retrieve, update and delete. Another question is, what are the key components of a Hibernate configuration object? The configuration provides two key components, namely data connection, database connection and class mapping is set up. This is handled by one or more configuration files. It is help in create the connection between Java classes and database table. Another question is, discuss the collection in a Hibernate. Hibernate provide a facility to persist the collection. A collection basically can be a list, set, map, collection, sorted set, sorted map, java.util package, java.util list, java.util set, java.util collection, etc. are some of the real interface type to declare the persistence collection value field. Hibernate insect persistence collection based on the type of interface. The collection interface generally behave like the type of value behavior. Another question is, what is the Habinet template class? When you integrate the Spring and Habinet, Spring ORM tools provide two helper classes, Habinet Trau support and Habinet template. The main reason to use them was to get two things: the session from the Habinet and Spring transaction measurement. However, from the 3.01 you can use the session factory get current session method to get the current session. The major advantage of using this template class is the exception transaction, but that can be achieved easily by using @repository annotation with service classes. Move to the another question. Another question is, what are the benefits of using Habinet template? There are some benefits of using Habinet template. First benefits is automatic session closing ability. The interaction with the Habinet session is simplified. Exception handling is automated. Which are the design patterns that are used in Habinet framework? There are few design patterns used in Habinet framework. First is a domain model pattern. Second is data mapping. Fourth is a proxy pattern, and third is a proxy pattern, and fourth is a factory patterns. Just I'm discuss is a little bit about the like a domain model pattern and object model of the domain that incorporate both achiever as well as data. Data mapper means a layer of the map that move data between object and a database while keeping it is independently of each other and the map itself. Proxy pattern means it is used for lazy loading. Factory pattern means used in a session factory. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe this video, and we will upload the second part, Hibernate second part, interview question and answer, in my next video. Thank you.